Hi, I'm Felix, and I'm WAVA's Trans Inclusion Coordinator, and I'm so excited to introduce you to this year's recognition zine. To say that the past year has been difficult would be an understatement. I've wondered many times over 2020 and now well into 2021 how this year will be spoken about in history books. The year the world shut down and held its breath, the year wildfires darkened the skies for weeks, the year we were afraid to leave our houses. It's also been a year of mass social movements for justice. Right before the pandemic, we shut down Canada in defense of Indigenous sovereignty, and millions of us demanded justice for Black lives and reckoned with the role of police in our communities. It's baffling to recount how much has happened since the last time we published recognition, and I feel the weight of the past year in our artists' work. Recognition is about visibility for queer and trans experiences of sexualized violence. Visibility has always been a tough thing for us. On the one hand, it feels liberatory to see ourselves reflected in the world, and we can only build community when we see each other. On the other hand, visibility can be dangerous. Straight and cis people can spot us to target for hate or to fetishize under the veil of inclusion. This push and pull is even more heightened during COVID, when it seems like every other article online is about us, but many of us are going weeks and months without seeing another queer person. This complicated relationship to visibility is even more present when we talk about queer on queer violence. We often say that queer violence is made invisible by the deep heterosexism of mainstream anti-violence movements, and that we don't have much understanding past the narrative of cis men harming cis women, period. It's impossible to talk about violence in our community when we don't have the words to do so, and I know many queer survivors who have struggled to recognize abusive relationships because nothing they were experiencing was reflected in the resources they found or recognized by the crisis workers they spoke to. But even though it's hard to name, queer and trans people know exactly how much violence goes on in our communities. It might not be spoken, but it feels present in queer spaces, like a slight shift in air pressure. We hold our breath and our tongues in order to create an airtight seal of silence to keep straight and cis people's hatred out. We can see this as an act of resilience, or as a way to discard the most vulnerable among us in order to protect the most powerful among us. The silence happens because we know that breaking it risks bringing more hatred to our communities from a heterosexist world. Every time I talk to groups of social workers about queer on queer violence, I have an old knot in my stomach that says, don't tell them this part. They already think we're all sick. Recognition is meant for queer and trans people to share with each other what violence has looked like for us and to start giving words and meaning beyond what we were all taught about sexual violence towards cis straight women. It's a place to name explicitly what might be hiding unspoken in our guts or spoken only in euphemisms. In this isolated, hyper-visible time, I hope that hearing about other queer and trans people's experiences feels like a lifeline. I hope we can see ourselves reflected in each other rather than how the dominant culture sees us. I want to thank all the contributors for their bravery and vulnerability, and all the queers out there who are surviving their way into the liberation we deserve. Fiona is a 21-year-old bisexual queer artist and yoga teacher. They say, throughout my life, I've always looked at poetry and art as my only sources of self expression, a place to dive deep into the depths of my emotions and portray them in a way that felt right. I cling to words and expressions as if I've finally defined my being. Like the truest version of myself is just out of reach, and maybe I can reach under the veil of words and take a chance with their meaning.
Teen girlhood is one of the most violent things one can experience. It was not sweet like they said it would be. It was bruised knees. It was violation. It was panic attacks in the shower. It was trading adrenaline for despair. When girlhood was over, it took a lot to forgive the world for robbing me of my purity. And so I granted myself the authority to treat it like something I could pick up and put down, and not something to cling to and preserve like a delicate flower. I decided that innocence was a state of mind. I was appalled at the thought that my liberation would take place post-menopause, when my sexual fire dimmed to glowing coals. I did everything to disown my internalized male gaze, and rebuilt my world with the hands of the women in my life. I refused to let the experience of my womanhood be reduced to feeling like pheromone-soaked prey.
Angelica Solomon is a gender-fluid Desi poet, spoken word artist, organizer, and multidisciplinary performer based on what is colonially known as Vancouver, BC, on the stolen and unsurrendered territories of the Coast Salish, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. Angelica is currently conjuring an arts collective of queer brown women and non binary artists and working on their forthcoming collection with Right Bloody Publishing.
I want a world in which there are no seasons to slut-shame daughters, and daughters can choose not to be daughters. I want a world in which there are no excuses for the violence of fathers, and men are not traumatized by the violence of patriarchy, and daughters can choose not to bear the blood of the wounds. I want a world in which the gloss of my nails, the length of my hair, the brown shell of my body, the expansiveness of my gender are not up for debate. I want a world in which I learn to say no from the bellows. My no makes way for the cosmic yes, the orgasmic please, the fucktastic more. I walk away proudly, dripping in gold, dancing on the stage. Men drool in confusion. My queerness is ceremony, sacred, untouchable. I am not your sweetheart. I am a bitch with my tongue out, ass out, tits out, and a garland of heads like Kali Ma, and everybody knows not to fuck with me. We are in your dingy studio where you touch my thigh uncomfortably and call me sweetheart. You kiss me without permission, and instead of doing nothing, I say stop. And the party is frozen in time, and the drunk jazz players stop dancing, and the cocky boy in the turquoise beret whips around, and the band's horns lose their brightness like an erection losing blood. You do not gaslight me. You do not deny my experience. You fall to your knees and pray at my feet, now begging to be absolved. But it was never my duty to fix you.